Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, back for yet another talking head video here on the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. So, couple questions today that came in that I'm going to get to, but as always, reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, thealchemistcabinet.com, any of the social media, however you want to get a hold of me with any of your questions about home distilling or professional distilling. I will do my absolute best to answer those questions. This is something that I really enjoy doing. I see this as a, I don't really make any money off this, and I don't try to because I'm lucky enough to live my dream as a distiller. And so the best thing that I could possibly do to help people and to help myself spiritually and mentally with my health is to help other people out there that are curious about this art of distillation. That's why everything I do is somewhat distillation related, whether it's agriculture or it's the If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast. Alchemy is what distillation descended from. A dog hair or something on my hat. It doesn't matter. Anyways, hermeticism is, part of distillation. And so doing good things and talking about words and thoughts and meanings and discernment, that's a big part of what I do. That's why I wrote the Distillers Almanac. If you're interested at all in that, you can get that at thealchemistcabinet.com. Kim should have new copies of it up there and available. They will come to us first. We will sign them and send them back out to you. So they are a little slow getting to you, but we will get them out there. And that's something we're going to be doing every year, is a new almanac for every single year. And now that I've laid one out, I've got a better idea of how to lay them out, the information I want to expand upon next year, and how much deeper I want to go into how the celestial events affect such things as distillation and agriculture, because it is something that we as a modern society miss out on pretty completely. I mean, it's no replacement for the Farmer's Almanac, and the Farmer's Almanac is no replacement for someone who really knows how to read charts. But, altogether, we can give you at least enough base information to hopefully improve your game a little bit. So, that being said, let's get into today's questions. And the first one, I unfortunately cannot remember who it came from, but I do remember the question. I don't have it printed out in front of me, but it was basically a question about why distillers, when they make mash, don't do a mash out. And for those of you who don't know what a mash out is, this is something that the beer brewers do. So basically, after they finish their mash, they raise the temperature back up, I think around 170 degrees or so. It's kind of a pasteurization step. But more importantly, what it does is it actually helps thin out the liquid just a little bit, and arrests the enzymatic activity by deactivating the enzymes in the mash. So I suspect that many distillers that are single malt aficionados probably do a mash out. Most of us in the industry don't do a mash out. Now, maybe home distillers, this is something to think about. We don't typically do it in the distilled spirits industry because we are almost all grain on distillers. Not everyone, but most of the bigger ones are grain on distillers, meaning the grain and everything stays in the mash the entire time during fermentation and during distillation. And as such, we are able to get much higher efficiency because we're pulling all that alcohol out of the grain, and we're pulling any of that leftover flavor out of the grain. So for most of us, doing a mash out is not necessary. But secondarily, the other part of that is that while fermentations tend to be fairly clean, because whatever your most active organism is, which is yeast, we're pitching at high rates, it tends to outcompete anything else in that same situation as long as everything is fairly sterile. But we do have some distillery microbugs that we want to keep a hold of, and we want to keep those in the mash because that's part of the character and the fingerprint of the distillery. So we don't really want to hit that pasteurization temperature on the way back up if we don't have to. We like the lactobacillus that rides in on the malt, and trust me, every bit of malted grain that you will ever see has got lactobacillus on it, and it is an important part of the character of most distilleries and their finished product. Secondarily, the reason that we don't do it is because we don't want that enzyme to stop working. Now, I've talked many times about how I, as a distiller, if I'm using exogenous enzymes, I don't use them at full capacity. I use them at 90% the recommended rate, because I'm not really trying to go after all those dextrins to be broke down into sugar. I want some starchy components still in the matrix so that those distill across aromatically in pot still distillation, and I get those wonderful aromas that lead to wonderful flavors in that finished whiskey. But I also can't sacrifice a whole lot of yield. So I want as much conversion as I can get. And so if you're using an exogenous enzyme like, not beta, but, I can't think of it at this moment. Anyways, it doesn't matter. You put it in at 105 and it continues to work for a couple days. I'm sure someone's gonna be watching this and be like, blah, 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 idiot. And I know it. I just can't think of it at the moment. So we're moving on so we don't have to stop the video and look this up and come back to it. But nonetheless, we want that to continue to work for the couple of days of fermentation that's happening so that we do have a decent yield off of it. In a home setting, a mash out might be worthwhile. I am curious how well a mash out would work for something like 100% rye, because 100% rye is a bitch to work with and does not lauter or sparge worth a shit. The main reason the brewers do the mash outs is so that they can lauter and sparge off of their grains. They oftentimes will also use rice hulls and things of that nature too. But I'm wondering if some combination of mashing out with, rice hulls and all that stuff going in for the lauter and the sparge wouldn't be a possibility for home distillers to remove all of the grain if they have the equipment to do this. Something with a false bottom or a screen they can raise, cage that they can raise their grain out of, could be a distinct possibility, something to think about. So I hadn't really thought about that before, so that was a good question. Moving on to the next question here. So this is from Dale, and he says, I ordered a stainless gin basket from AliExpress. I have never seen one used. I get the gist of loading the botanicals after 4 shots and heads. However, the basket comes with a drain. I purchased a shutoff valve for that, but don't know the purpose of the drain. Is it just to empty the basket of liquid after the run, or to make sure pressure is relieved after shutting down, or to put back into the pot, add to the final product? Just not sure. Can you explain how all these things are intended to be used? Typically, you're actually loading the gin basket before the distillation. I would recommend running the gin basket on a third distillation. So in other words, do your normal pot still distillation, or if you do a single pass distillation, do your methodology the way you always do it and go ahead and take your heads off. Get your hearts collected, then put those hearts back in the still, proof them down to 80 proof, and then rerun. So that way when you rerun, you just take a couple milliliters off the front, because some of the oils initially coming off the botanicals can be a little bit weird, but you're not worried about losing all that flavor to the heads, right? Or bypass the gin basket so you can run the heads off, then open up the gin basket, and then there's your botanicals. You're not losing any flavor to those heads. That's just me. That's my methodology and what I suggest. It's a great question. So you asked about the valve on the bottom of that botanical basket, and a lot of people don't think about this. This is really kind of high-end distillers methodology stuff here, if you're really into botanical spirits. The reason those valves are there is that during the distillation, what happens is at some point in time, those botanicals have set in there in heat, and they've expressed all the positive oils that they're going to. Now, maybe not all of them have at one time, but certain ones are coming offline while other ones are coming online, depending on the heat, the alcohol, etc., because everything's miscible in different proofs, different vapors, etc. But what happens is that those ones that are making heavy oils that are real vegetal that you don't want to taste, that stuff's dripping back down to the bottom of that gin basket. And if you don't take it out of there during the run, all your vapors hitting that and bringing that nasty, bitter, vegetal, herbal thing across that you don't want in your gin. So that valve is there specifically to take that off during the distillation. Most of the time you can run a distillation efficiently enough with those botanicals that that's not really going to become any kind of issue. But a lot of people do make the mistake of not realizing that that's what that is there for, is to get rid of those heavy botanical oils. In my opinion, they're not good for anything. Throw them out. Don't use them. Don't try to rerun them. You're not doing yourselves any favor by putting that low quality stuff back into a high quality product, even if you're redistilling it. But that's just the way that I think of it. The other thing I'll say about gin baskets, I mentioned having a bypass where you can bypass the gin basket. That's helpful not only for taking your heads off, but understand that during that distillation, quite often, especially if it's on, say, like a double pass distillation where you're making gin from low wines, Quite often those botanicals are going to run out of the positive flavor attributes that you want in the spirit somewhere around 120 proof. By 120 proof, you may, especially on a third distillation for gin, or may not, especially on a second distillation where you use low wines, be into the tails. So it's nice to have that bypass to be able to kick back on when you're getting ready, when you're done with your botanicals, but you haven't hit your tails yet. That way you're keeping all that nasty botanical flavor out of those late hearts, and you're not admixing those two things and going into an early form of tails because there's all kinds of nasty botanical oils in there. So those are just some things to think about, and I hope that helps you guys out. As always, please check me out, thealchemistcabinet.com. Order the Practical Distiller's Almanac. Let me know what you think of it. And leave me questions at bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, social media, or YouTube comments below. I love y'all, and I'll catch you soon.